Senior leaders in gaming and hospitality know that operations is complex.
Operations, what they oftentimes miss is they don't have a long-term strategic plan or a long-term focus.
You're balancing tradition with innovation, community values with business metrics, and guest experience with 1,000 moving parts. But what if there is another layer to operational excellence that could transform how your property runs?
We on a mission to do our best work for our team and for our clients.
Expense management, revenue generation, all of those things are what we're focused on.
In this episode, we're sitting down with Loren Gill and Emily Green from LD2G Enterprises, a leading consulting firm in gaming and hospitality world.
They don't have a long-term strategic plan or a long-term focus, and they don't understand really where they're going beyond the current week or month or quarter or year ahead.
Finding a holistic approach, it's really important to look at both the long-term and the short-term, to your point.
So Loren and Emily, welcome.
Thank you, Naja. Great to see you again.
Awesome. So today's episode is centered around the operations side of your business. So the first question is, what do leaders miss when it comes to operations?
You know, that's a great question. And it's one that's really kind of core to our business and one that we love to talk about because we work across the country for many different variety of clients. And, you know, when I reflect on some of my experiences, but also more importantly, as we work with other organizations, I think the operations, what they oftentimes miss is they don't have a long-term strategic plan or a long-term focus, and they don't understand really where they're going beyond the current week or month or quarter or year ahead. So we encourage people to take a longer-term view of their business and what may happen and what they predict to happen and what they want to change, but then also break it down into smaller pieces, smaller tactics for current issues, but then also having to be mindful of current market trends, both in the micro and macro environment. So, you know, I think it's have a long-term viewpoint, but with short-term tactics and measurements to ensure success. And again, the flexibility to be able to change over time as things happen in real time.
Absolutely.
Emily, what do you think about that?
I would definitely add to that. I think that the things that are often missed or overlooked, especially from a leadership perspective, the solutions are often there in your team members. Your team members, the ones that are doing the work, that are going through the process day in and day out. Oftentimes they are the ones, because they're so close to the work, they are the ones that have the solutions and the answers in mind. And I think sometimes leadership, for whatever reason, can fail to give the team the opportunity to speak up and to have that voice and to really take that feedback into account for the betterment of the organization as a whole.
Yeah, you know, I agree with that and encourage that. And certainly setting up listening sessions and listening posts to be able to make people feel safe and feel wanted and encouraged to participate in that is very powerful. And we find that all the time that, you know, I think said maybe a little bit different way, we as senior leadership oftentimes get focused on larger, more long-term issues, and we may even fail or forget to think about, hey, we have to deal with today's issues and tomorrow's issues and challenges from not only it's the right thing to do for our team and for our guests, but also it's an important piece to make sure we don't continue those challenges and issues into the future, right? So if there's a problem or an issue or you need resources, certainly having the ability to have an open mind to getting that feedback and encouraging it and actually going out and seeking it out so that people feel that it's a safe place for them to hear. Because oftentimes, I tell you, I've seen it in my career over 30 years, oftentimes those small issues can morph into big issues if they're not appropriately addressed.
Absolutely. And I think finding a holistic approach, it's really important to look at both the long-term and the short-term, to your point, incorporate all of that feedback and find the best solution for everyone.
So you both work for the world's best properties, and you help when you come on board and you start walking that first walk of that property. What are you looking for exactly?
You know, something that I've done over the last 3 decades, before I take a job, I go there and play consumer.
So important.
And talk to a lot. They don't know who I am, right? They don't know that maybe I'm a prospective employee or a leader. And I try very hard to experience as many experiences as there is, because that gives you, I teach a session, it's called Inside the Box or Outside the Box. And in the beginning, you're outside the box and you see everything from a very different lens or perspective. Once you work there, you're inside the box and you get conditioned to the environment and way other people think and see, right? So, when I look at that, I look at it through what does it look like before you get there, and then compare and contrast those results to other great performers in the industry. And I think one of the true blessings I've had is I've had the ability to travel a lot and see a lot of really, really great things, and frankly, some not so great, kind of crappy things, to be honest with you, right? And so when you see those crappy places, you say, I don't want to be like that. So let me give you a real example. On a, not to call any names, but a company that I used to work for and I was in a leadership role, my first time through, I walked through and the trash cans were overflowing on the casino floor. And there was ashtrays full between the slot machines. And so I always ask, is that what a top high performing organization would look like? And, rhetorically, but of course the answer is no. You would see a spotless, facility. You would see a place with a lot of smiling employees. And I also think when you're not actually working there, you get to ask a lot of dumb questions and then you get a lot of dumb answers, but you also get some great insightful, if I only had this tool or if I only had these supplies, I could do a much more efficient job. And so in my own travels, I've tried to do a lot of that homework before I got there. And then the second one is then, and just as you said eloquently, Emily, is get the opportunity to talk to a lot of frontline employees, because what the management and leadership team tells you is happening versus the reality of walking in somebody else's shoes for a day, a shift, or a week is oftentimes the distance is very, 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 very much a real check in what reality is.
Fantastic point. I think that, you absolutely nailed it when it comes to that disconnect that comes between the leadership and the front line. When I walk into a property, the first thing I always notice is the energy. And, I think a lot of people, when they think about that, they think about simplistic things like the music or the lighting and things like that. And I think it goes much more into the culture, because the culture is what guides the team members, the leadership, and drives that cohesiveness across the property. And I think that when you feel that synergy, when you walk into that property, that's what creates that excitement and that environment that really makes people want to stay, want to do more, and just want to be more involved. So that's always the first thing that I notice. And when it comes to that, it's always looking out for the positives and the negatives too.
Sure.
Because I think we can easily get caught up in looking at the negative things and not appreciating the really positive things that we see as well.
It's so funny because that happens all the time. And we find that in our business too. It's easy to go in and pick apart any business or operation. And how you deliver those messages is oftentimes challenging, right? But on the other side, it's really pointing out the 3, 4, 5, 10 things that you do awesome and great, because those are the cornerstones, the building blocks, the foundation of doing something really great. And you can use those as real examples, right? Hey, this employee is doing such an exemplary job, i.e. the bathrooms are spotless. Why aren't all of our bathrooms spotless? If it can be done over here, why isn't it done everywhere, right? As an example. So yeah, but I do think that is the core essence. And then oftentimes, I hate to say it, management gets caught up in office and paperwork and nonsense, and they lose touch of reality of why they exist. And what their number one goal is to be forward-facing, taking care of guests, anticipating their needs, making sure they have a great time and are wanting to come back and spend more time and money with the organization, but also creating a positive environment for team members to say, this is a cool place to work. I love coming to work every day. And not only does it pay the bills, but it is one that says, we really want to go here because we're part of something special. And I think that's the core element of being part of great operations.
Hey everyone, quick break from the episode just to ask you to subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're listening on your podcast app, a short review would help others find us. And the best way to support this channel is to share this with a leader in tribal gaming or hospitality who may value the new approaches to excellence. Now, back to the conversation.
In every industry, there are myths. So what is one myth that you'd like to bust about operations today?
Tricky.
The boss is always right.
The boss said it. Just say it.
I'll give you a couple. In the casino business, it is I win more or lose more if my card is in the machine or not in the machine. That is the one that has been, as long as there's been player tracking, player cards, that's been the one I've been like, there is no connection between that, and the outcomes are predetermined from a central processing unit. And it doesn't matter if you have your card or not card. I just think that's a real myth, and it still is out there today.
The superstition is so real. That's so true. That's a good example. I would say also, referencing the gaming industry in particular, I think that we in our previous lives have seen organizations that have leaned into revenues and profits and kind of using that as an excuse to let other things that they feel are less important go by the wayside. My experience is all in service and training. So service is something that's always been extremely important to me. And I think that we as an enterprise really prioritize being service oriented ourselves. And that's something that we encourage the businesses that we work with to focus on. But I think especially in times like now where there's a lot of volatility just in the economy in general, and enterprises are looking for places to cut, things like service often come on the chopping board, but it's so important. And I think it drives so many other important aspects of business. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Elon Musk chopped 70% of his employees and still maintain a company. So a lot of leaders are trying to think, well, what if we couldn't do that, right? So, but in the service industry, it's completely different because there's humans serving humans. So is this doable in your experience?
Yeah, I think all businesses ebb and flow over time, right? They have either a seasonality or an economic impact, or they generally grow over time, but we don't know how much. I think that the real opportunity is use data and use some data science and some predictive modeling to understand where the business is going so that you can appropriately plan for the resources needed to provide the best service, either by day part or by day of the week or holidays, et cetera. So I think there are certainly modeling that can be done to help predict future outcomes, right? I think the other side is in any business, and especially in some of the hospitality business, hotels or casinos, there's always slack resources, right? So we oftentimes find ourselves in this kind of yield management mode. The wise operators say, what is the best resources that we could put at any given time, right? And oftentimes the poor ones, you'll go in and you'll see 10 people standing around a podium, say at table games, and like, what are all these people standing around for, right? Why aren't they working at 7 o'clock at night versus 8 o'clock in the morning? So certainly there's math and data science that can help support that. But I think the other side of it is just being customer aware and customer focused and being able to understand how do we put the best team on the field at any given time, and then how do we support them, and then how do we provide really a great, awesome service experience. And those things can grow over time, right? The people who do it great see large, call it double-digit increases year after year after year. The people who don't do it well see stagnant growth, maybe decline or minimum growth. And then kind of to add on to what Emily said, it really oftentimes bothers me when people take a cost and only a cost decision to the business versus also focusing on how do we grow revenues? How do we take care of customers? How do we take care of employees? How do we really build this business to be an elite top performer? Because the costs take care of themselves if you have built the revenue side. The challenge is if you start focusing only on cost, it's this never-ending cycle, right? It's a swirl to the bottom. So we have to be focused on making sure we balance our approach in talking about how do we grow the business at the same time managing appropriately.
So what do you do when your team start to drift?
I tell you, that's one of my favorite topics. I actually have taught sessions on exactly that topic. And you know what we see? We open facilities, businesses, let's just use a casino example, right? And we teach standards and protocols and policies and procedures. And oftentimes those are very rigid, but also they are sometimes lax, but also times they're very necessary. So let me give you an example. When you deal 21, there's one way to properly deal 21. Hence why we have policies and procedures and protocols and techniques in place to make sure everyone does it the same way. Well, why do we do that? We do it so that supervisors and surveillance can see if someone is deviating from the standard. And then therefore it might be either just sloppiness or laziness, but it also might be collusion or cheating, right? So we put processes and protocols in place to be able to predict outcomes and then be able to measure any defects, right? So when we open restaurants, we put in standards. It will be a menu, and we'll cost out all the ingredients, and we'll create culinary techniques, and then we'll put pictures on the wall, and we tell servers, don't serve the plate unless it looks like this. That holds the culinary team accountable. So here's what inevitably happens. Opening day comes, and everybody's celebrating, yay, we're awesome, we're great. And then we get busy by all these darn things called customers. And then there's frustration, right? And employees start fighting and bitching, right? And then so what happens is people start taking shortcuts. And they start becoming more self-serving, and they lose focus. And so you know what really happens in those times is we created this term called drift. And they start drifting away from the norm because of maybe it's easier or perceived easier. But what happens is over time, you may say you got a great cheeseburger and fries on the first day you went to a restaurant. And then what happens a week or two later, you say, hey, Emily, let's go down to my favorite restaurant. Let's get the same cheeseburger and fries, and it's different. And what happens oftentimes is the normal conversation will be, it must be a different chef today. Okay, that bothers me a lot because we don't design restaurants, great restaurants, around who's the chef today. We design it on policies and procedures and protocols and creating a system for high quality outputs, right? And then we measure the deviation. And so in this case, what we talk about, we teach is trying to keep people to understand and stay focused on what the goal is, what the end mission is. And obviously, if there's an easier, better, more efficient way to do it, we'll change the standard. We'll change how we perform. But what we don't want to do is one day have some really great experience, i.e. a great cheeseburger, and then come back a week or two or a month later and have a really crappy experience. And so it's kind of like if you're out on the ocean and you're on a little raft or you're on a little surfboard and you just let it go, and you start saying, this is what we want to do, this is our intended outcome, but we say we're not going to do that anymore. And you drift out, and one day you wake up and you're at a totally different place. Just like how operations become a totally different place. What happens? Chaos happens. Mm. And so as we as effective leaders and effective managers have to make sure that we understand what the end desire is, and we coach and train, educate, and develop people to fulfill those needs.
And it's a lot of like reminding the staff about these standard operating procedures. But also I feel like if the staff has not bought into them,
yes,
that's, I feel, when the drifts start to happen. Because if my boss wants me to do something in a certain way, but I don't think it's the right one, and I don't have a safe space to speak up on that matter, then this is when I'm like, okay, let me try to sneak that in this way. And,
yeah, 100%. Let me give you a real example. You know, about 3 months ago, you know when eggs went to like $10 a dozen? And I was going through McDonald's drive-thru, which I do every once in a while for breakfast because I'm on the app and they got a $2 breakfast sandwich. I'm like, that's quite a deal, right? And so I'm driving through and I got my egg, McMuffin, sausage, cheese. And I opened it up to look at it. And again, eggs are $10. And I took a picture of it and I sent it out to the world. I said, what's wrong with this? This is a drift moment. You know what the egg McMuffin is? It is an egg with a mold, and it's a round, looks like a hockey puck, right? Mm-hmm. I got a folded egg. I'm like, oh, I can't have a folded egg. What that was I think they put some kind of extra water and juices in that egg to extend it because eggs are $10. So somebody said, we're going to drift. We're going to change the standard. We're going to change the protocol for saving cost. But and most people don't even know it's a folded egg or a hockey puck egg. But I did, right? And I'm like, drift. And what I did, I text my whole team, said, look at this. And then I put a poll out and I said, please tell me, consumers, what's wrong with this picture? And you know what? One smart guy
noticed.
Not only noticed, but wrote a whole explanation about what was wrong with it. I'm like, aha, that was a student of ours. Wow. And he paid attention in class. He listened.
Wow. Right? That's a perfect example. And I would ask, how has that impacted your experience with McDonald's going forward?
Well, I wrote him a nice little note with a picture and said, hey, I would appreciate my hockey puck versus my versus my fold over egg.
Absolutely.
And it was only one time that happened. So maybe my little letter, my little handwritten note, made a difference.
Maybe. We'd like to think so, right?
I hope so.
No, I think that's a really good example. And I think some drift is natural. So I think it's really important to just stay in tune with your team and sense when those things are happening. But I think the adaptability is also the important piece of that, which I think you spoke to really well, Loren. Policies and procedures exist for a reason, but we hire team members who are intelligent and adaptable because we want them to help us find those smarter, better ways of doing things. But we have to give them the opportunity to, again, share and to have that adaptability built into our processes and our culture.
Yeah.
To your point, Naja, making sure that leadership is open to that receiving that feedback and implementing change when necessary.
Yeah, love it. And one of the things we try to do is put a system in place to change the standard, right? For exactly what you said. Because if it is more efficient or easier or just, makes me happier to create folded eggs all day versus hockey puck eggs, but there should be a mechanism that says, these are the reasons why we're changing the standard. And from this day forward, we're going to change the standard so that it's about building trust with the consumer. You come, you buy something, you say, this is exactly what it is. And I know what I'm going to get. And then I'm a happy guy.
Yeah, if it's too rigid, it will break. So you have to find a way to keep the process malleable. An expensive operational mistake that you see operators are doing.
Boy, I'm going to start with the hard one first.
Okay.
Hiring the wrong people.
Right.
Or keeping the wrong people. Now, let me give you an example. We're working with a team right now, and the team that got you there may not be the team that gets you into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that's not saying anything bad about the previous team. That's actually giving them kudos, saying, great job, you got us here. I think we've all been in those places, right? Where, hey, our time we served and, our time is expired and somebody else is going to take the reins from here. But I had a real live example where an investor invested hundreds of millions of dollars and relied on the old team to take it a new business with a new business financial model with the old practices and the old standards in place. Those are difficult. It's what's the definition of lunacy? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's kind of that answer. My best learning was I was on the development team of the Borgata in Atlantic City, still to this day, one of the greatest properties across the country. And hey, by the way, I just gave him a shout out. Yay, I just gave him a shout out. we haven't said anything about anybody's names, but I was honored and privileged to be on the development team there. And one thing the key leader there instilled in me and instilled in everybody, we're investing $1 billion of capital. And oftentimes people forget the human capital piece, or they underestimate the value of that. And one thing I have to give him is kudos, and the whole entire team there, and the ownership teams. They also invested wisely in putting a great leadership and operational team in place to fulfill that financial mission. We invested X capital, we want Y returns. Many people say, if you just build a beautiful place, it's going to be great. But they forget to say we have to infuse it with great, smart, talented people from top to bottom and left to right and all sideways to make sure that dream and vision comes to reality. But and ultimately in a capitalistic venture, that whoever put up the money gets rewarded for their invested capital, right? And that was, gosh, I can't believe that was 22 years ago, the Borgata opened. And that was one of the key leadership learnings that I got from someone else to say, don't shortchange yourself on talented people. At the end of the day, talent always wins.
Any further efficiencies that we can find in the operations of properties that you help?
There's so much opportunity, and I think it's really just a matter of being aware, seeing the things that these enterprises might not want to be brought to light. Like, these are the things that are really important to focus on, the things that often get swept under the rug. It's really important to just be honest and transparent, I think, is part of it, which I'll bring back to humility as well. I think it's really important for leadership to be able to be humble when something doesn't go the way that they planned, because it's all a learning opportunity. And I think humility is so important when it comes to the culture that's being built and ultimately the efficiency of the enterprise as a whole.
Absolutely.
Can I add on to that? I think one of the biggest challenges we deal with is fear.
Ooh.
And it's our own fear, our own kind of self-reflection, our own kind of like, I'm not feeling like I'm good enough or worthy enough. Stuart Smiley, SNL, like, did you ever see that one? It was really great. If you haven't seen this, Google or go on YouTube and look at Stuart Smiley interview of Michael Jordan. And he's like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. And then Michael, have you ever felt that way, Michael? And he says,
my gosh.
He says, no, I've never felt that way before. But I think fear is a real emotion, and we make decisions based on fear of outcomes of known and predicted and unknown outcomes. So when we go out and we visit properties all the time, we ask ourselves, why do you do that? Or why, conversely or inversely, why don't you do that instead? And I can only put it to this way, in just being real, right? Just being real. I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of getting reprimanded. I'm afraid of somebody might think bad of me. Okay. We say, okay, 2 or 3% a year growth is okay because it doesn't get me any trouble. I don't have to answer to the board. I don't have to answer to my boss. Slow and steady wins the race. And many times I agree with that. But in other times, I look at the long-term net present value of those decisions and say, if you only would have taken more risk, calculated risk, if you would have only made better, smarter decisions, involved more of your team, asked more better detailed questions, and then took action on it, I will tell you the number of casinos that I see that are, I would say average, which is a low bar, but is average ran, but they are perfectly okay with doing the same stuff over and over and over again. It's comfortable. And I don't have to answer any questions and nobody's going to rough me up over it, right? And I would say, why don't you take some more risks and why don't you do some more creative thinking? And of course, do math and do science and, talk to customers and do all those things that we all like to do, but push, challenge status quo. And I will tell you that fear is real because people live in the dynamic of what's going to happen to me if I make some controversial decisions. And so we try to coach and encourage people to kind of push the status quo. And I understand the reality of not all organizations are built to have people kind of buck the system, if you know what I'm saying.
Of course.
I heard you talk a lot about data analytics and stuff. When it comes to measuring great performance, what are the priorities that you look for?
Very few people know what great performance looks like because they haven't seen it or experienced it before. So therefore, the metrics and the measurements are difficult to measure something that you don't know. Okay?
You don't know what you don't know.
That's exactly right. And so we find that quite frequently. And so here's what I would say. The ability to create and obtain and synthesize great data is really the core piece of business, at least the businesses we work with. And so when we ask operators, how's your business doing? They immediately give a reaction. That's really good, or it's kind of crappy, right? But they don't know what good or crappy is because its context is as compared to what? Compared to last year, compared to last month, or compared to the guy down the street who's kicking our pants every month. You follow where I'm going?
Yeah.
And so the ability to create data, analytics, and reporting is a core element, I think, in our business world. But the other part is analyzing and interpreting that data and then creating an action plan and then actually going out and doing it. And then creating productive measurements to say, hey, did we get it right or we screwed up, right? And the answer is we oftentimes do both. We get it right and we screw it up. So we learn from screwing it up and say we're not going to do that again, and we're going to add on to that. But I think the challenge really is to really have this honest conversation with our team and say, let's define what great looks like. And then let's build a model, a pathway, a vision to say, how do we accomplish this? So let's just give us an example. Say we have a $10 million business. We want to double our business to $20 million. Most people say, oh my God, it can't be done. Okay, well, the answer is it can be done. We just have to figure out how to generate more positive revenue, maybe manage some costs better, and get more gravity, more traffic through the front doors. And in that case, it means you have to convince customers that your product, your service, your entertainment value is higher, better than anything else they can find that is open at the same time, right? The corner bar, the movie theater, travel to Las Vegas, whatever the case may be, right? But we want to put you and us in this relationship that says, hey, come give us a shot. And if we can get X% of those people who are currently either rejecting us or who are currently, let's say they see us once a year, we could put measurements and analytics around what if we got 20% of the customers only see us once a year, make us twice a year. You could do math and you could build a business case around that.
And I would add that I think data analytics are so important. And I think that a lot of properties are great at collecting data. But then to LG's point, it's a matter of what do we do with it after that? And data analytics is really all about storytelling and really being able to translate that data and into insights that can then be turned into actionable items. So I think that that's something that we've seen a lot is that a lot of properties are great at collecting the data, and then they have this treasure trove of information, and they just don't know how to mine for the gold that's in there. And it's very much in there. It's just a matter of finding it.
Yeah.
One of my former bosses and mentors, he knows who he is, so I don't have to call him out by name. I'll save him. He used to say, "In God we trust, all others bring data."
Amen.
That, right?
Amen. It's true. Numbers don't lie.
I love that because that's kind of, if made to make a business decision, we all have our experiences, our heart, our gut, and that may be verified by data or may be in contra to data. And so that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? That's where you got to make a hard decision.
The problem is when data is involved, machine learning is one of the best tools to make sense of that data. However, we're seeing a lot of corporations are resisting AI in their operations. They're fearful of it. It's, there's a lot of privacy concerns, security concerns. So what's your take on using AI within the space?
I would agree with everything you said. Privacy concerns, data security concerns, cyber attack concerns, all of those things are a real piece of business, and we advise clients on those topics, and we look through oftentimes a risk mitigation lens, right? To make sure that you don't do something that could potentially later, sabotage or hurt your business, not only from a financial, but from a relationship or a reputation. So we advise clients on the risk management piece of that, because there is a real reputation risk. There's a financial risk. There's a managerial risk. There's an employee risk. There's ownership risk. So certainly being keen to that. But I will also go back to what we talked about earlier. A big part of it's fear, just fear of the unknown, fear of how to use the tool, fear of how to make it work and gel into your management style or into your operating philosophy, right? I came from a generation that my startup was, when we talked about great customers, pit bosses, whatever, would have a notebook. And I still carry one today. You pull out your notebook and you write down name, number, and he's a nice guy, and he's from Austin, Texas, and he wears nice shoes, and he wants a $10,000 credit line. That's how we issued credit, right? And so over time, we've started building databases and building other instruments to be able to facilitate those transactions, right? But this whole new world about, and I think it's also fear. Fear is one of the economic piece and the data piece, but the other fear in real, and I hear it quite a bit, how is that going to diminish my role, diminish my service, and potentially, the consequence could be my job is minimized or I'm eliminated, right? And so I think that those are the real things that create and cause fear. It's really this lens of I'm managing through the unknowns, and I'm based here, and I'm anchored there, versus seeing what could happen in the future as a result of using these great tools.
Right.
And I think there are lots of recent examples in recent history of times where things have been introduced, like the internet, and people were very fearful of it in the beginning, but then we saw the benefit and how it can really impact our lives in a positive way. And look how we all have a computer in our pocket now. Right. So it's really interesting how important it is for us to embrace AI, but also understand the risks, as we mentioned as well.
And this brings us to another question about the battle of the generations. So there's the modern day.
Hey, don't look at my gray hair when you say that.
There's the.
When you said that, I just wanted to do it.
I think it's in the mindset more than it's in the age. But there's like the mindset of traditional leadership, right? These are the executives that have done the same thing for years, and they continue doing that, and they fail to adapt to new waves, whether in leadership theory or technology and stuff like that, versus modern day, highly equipped, sophisticated leaders. What's your take on that when it comes to leading these organizations?
That's a powerful, powerful question. I would think, without being scripted here, without knowing what you were going to ask, I would suggest that maybe the right, highest, best answer is a combination of all of the above. I'm going to pick letter D, all the above.
All of the above.
Because, I grew up, to all y'all's point, went to business school at the Kellogg School, graduated in 1995. The internet was just being invented and just becoming commonplace. 1995. I know I'm showing my age, right? But we studied a lot of things like Peter Drucker, right? Or General Electric was the big conglomerate company, and Jack Welch wrote his book, and we studied a lot of things like that. And, I read a lot of things like, one of my favorite books of all time is a book called Reengineering Your Corporation. That was a big buzzword back in the mid 90s, where people were trying to make large businesses, large conglomerates, think smaller and be more efficient, right? And I think those business traits and those business skills are fundamental and still very necessary. So for example, Michael Porter, Harvard Business School, Five Forces was one of those timeless business books, right? And I still talk about that, even though I may not cite that research and that work. Just on a call today, I was talking about how to build high walls to prevent entry and barriers to entry, right? Which is one of Porter's Five Forces. And so when I look at that, I say those are great fundamentals that I think everyone should know. But then go forward. Because of technology, look at some of the leadership, look at the people who have done amazing things really through the technology companies, and look at the leadership of technologies. And I mean, we could go through all of those great leaders now, but look how they have frankly reinvented the world in a very short time. And we could talk about Mr. Musk, Mr. Zuckerberg, right? We could talk about all of those key technology leaders, and they've just transformed business. They've transformed the way we think. One of my favorite was Steve Jobs, right? And when I would prepare for conversations and talks and business development and dreaming big, I would often look at Steve Jobs and some of the presentations he did and how he communicated the story, and he communicated the vision, he communicated the dreams. And, there was just a thing I just saw. It was Microsoft's founders, and I think it was Steve Ballmer. He said, "Can you believe they're going to launch this thing called the iPhone and iPad? And, these guys are crazy. They'll never knock us off, right?
Yep.
Right?" And the answer was they did, because they were inner focused versus outwardly focused. Right. So I think there's a lot of great lessons to be learned from those experiences. But I would also say there's a lot of great, and by the way, it's not to diminish any of those people nor their company's success. They're fundamentally just great. But, when I look at, one other one I want to say, when I prepare for speeches, I would also oftentimes look back or when I'm trying to give some inspiration. And one of my favorite inspirational moments I used to read quite a bit and study was President John F. Kennedy, right? And I would think about business, about what he proclaimed and professed for the United States in the 1960s when we were in a race, right? A race to get to the moon. And some of the things he taught and professed back then were very insightful and just very dynamic. And, we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard, right?
Yeah.
It's impactful.
It's impactful. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty profound, right? And I think in today, many people look for the easy way out versus really just doing the grind and doing the work. And I think if you look at any of those successful companies, they're really successful because those people really worked very hard. People like yourself working out of their garage, trying to make those ends, right? Hey, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm going to build a company. Well, baloney, you're in your garage. Okay, today I'm in my garage, but 25 years from now, I'm going to rule the economic world, right? And then I look at the future and the leaders of the future, and I'm amazed at how fast information comes and is shared. And I think the reality is today is you almost have to go to factcheck.org all the time, just because information flows, and then people take it through their own lens, their own filter, and then everybody adds to it, right? And so it's hard to control the message or control the story in today's world because everything's viral and virtual. But the people who do it really, really well and who command that, I mean, again, let's just talk Elon Musk, not a political statement by any means, but how he went in, and you talked earlier about, hey, he bought X and refined and really enabled that business to go on a different trajectory. But also what he was also doing was creating a way to control the message and control what information was shared or censored or not censored or whatever the case may be, right? And so I think that's one of the biggest opportunities and potentially a challenge in the future. And I've learned and leaned into this is the accessibility of information, but also trying to dissect what is real and what is falsehood or what is, embellished upon. But I think the future leaders will have their challenge is going to keep employment folks happy and engaged in a world of where information and lives change almost instantaneously.
It's a changing world, and adaptability and being open-minded to new ideas and technologies are also going to be very important. I want to ask you about LD2G from your perspective. What does your company do? And we'll see from both of your ends as well.
Wonderful. So at LD2G, we work with different tribal enterprises and corporations to help them with any sort of operational efficiencies that they want to improve. We also work with a lot of tribes who are building new casinos from the ground up. So we're really all about operational efficiency, leadership development, expense management, revenue generation. All of those things are what we're focused on. But we're really about good people, helping good people do great things.
Awesome. How's it working with Loren?
Working with Loren is an adventure every day. It's always exciting. It keeps me on my toes. I learn every single day something new about him, about myself, about the business, about how the world operates. I think that there's always something new to learn. And we also have a lot of fun and we laugh a lot, which is something that's really important for me when it comes to that workplace environment. And so I think that Loren's done a great job of creating that atmosphere for us where we can have fun and do great things.
And last question to you. What prompts you to say, I want to create this, LD2G?
I don't think anybody's ever asked that question before. Ooh. I have this burning desire to help people do great stuff. And I have been a student of this industry for 30 years. And I've seen some really good stuff and some really not so good stuff. And I just want to help inspire, motivate, share some stories, share some experiences, and help others really get on a pathway where they can be well and do well. That's very core to my values and very core to my heart. I love working with really smart, hardworking, coachable people and seeing where they take a little bit of information or a little bit of assignment and duty and really just take it and run with it. I love the fact that we have an organization that shares openly, and we really are committed to helping people grow, not only business-wise, but personally. And I've told my team, if there's anything I can do to help support that, just let me know. And, one of the things we've talked about, and I hope this never changes, but we don't have a PTO form in our company, right? You need to we were talking about, I think in our past session was, how do you support people? Like if you need a day off, you just call me and say, I need a day off. And if you want to share, I'll gladly help. And if you just say, hey man, it's private, I need a day off. Okay, you need a day off, take a day off. We're much more focused on taking care of each other and being servant leaders than we are about, you got to work 9 to 5 and you didn't clock in till 9:15 and nana boo boo, you're a bad guy or I'm going to talk bad about you. No, it's about, are we focused on what the real end result is? Are we on a mission to do our best work for our team and for our clients and for the people who are downstream that may not even know us, but we're doing great work to take care of them? And, I think that's probably one of the missions and callings that I've received from tribal nations to be able to help them, because we're working on tribal development projects right now. And we don't even know, we haven't met yet the membership that it's ultimately going to provide dividends to. But somewhere they are saying, hey, someone is doing this really great work to help us take care of our elders, help our tribal government be successful, help our people get access to great quality health care, help our people get an education and maybe restart our language of our tribe, to provide safety and security for our families that they may not have today. But because of some of the things we're doing from an economic development standpoint, we play a very small role in that. But I'm very proud that we get that opportunity to help people get a leg up, that we help them, maybe develop their careers or maybe just develop their lives and get out of some challenging situations that, maybe them or their kids or their grandkids could just have a much better, more successful, life and feel really good about, some of the work that we've done. And again, they may never even know we played a small part in that, but that to me is very rewarding. And then be able to coach and teach them to be able to, to be able to do well for their own communities. I think it's really one of the highlights of what we've been able to do.
That's awesome. Thank you both.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.